Mic check. Mic check, 1 2 1 2. All right, hopefully my internet connections woes are corrected. And I think we can go live. So welcome everybody. Not sure how many people are going to be able to show up with the late notice of the stream, but for anybody who does manage to or watches this in the VOD, thank you. Today we're going to be continuing with our build of the LDO V0.2-S1 kit, which is kind of a little bit of a kind of holdover before the V0.2-R1 kit came out. So the kit that I have did not come with the small changes that the V0.2-R1 LDO kit has, just to keep that in mind. But yeah, otherwise it's pretty close. So we're going to continue with that. Of course, I have built a V0 before in the past. I built the FormBot V0, which is actually behind me, and it has been printing out all of the parts for this kit, so it is going strong. It'll be interesting to see how well this build goes, and you know, obviously it's probably going to be quite a bit faster, I hope, because I already have the experience of building a V0.2 and I'm pretty familiar with the process. But it's also going to be interesting to see, you know, where the LDO kit kind of differs in terms of the quality of the parts and some of the quality of life changes that it might have in order to help the build go a little bit better. So if anybody does hop into the chat, go ahead. Hopefully it sounds okay. I heard a Windows notification that scared the crud out of me, but hopefully the stream quality is going good. We're trying to get the 1440p streams going again. I had some trouble with it last time we streamed, but hopefully it's a little bit better today. I've got a few things on the agenda. First of all, I want to thank MatterHackers for sending this kit out. If you guys aren't familiar with MatterHackers, they are a storefront, and they produce or sell a lot of 3D printing related items. You can go there and pick up Filament. You can pick up kits like the LDO kits. They've got a V2.4 kit and a Trident kit as well. They provided this kit for me for the purpose of making this video. They didn't say I needed to review it or do anything, or just kind of make content around it and let people know that they have kits. So they also sent along a little bit of other things, and I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys today. So we've got this whole box with some MatterHackers items in it. So we're gonna go through this a little bit and just talk about some of the stuff that they offer and some of the stuff that you guys can pick up. So what's gonna be the best camera for this one? Try this. This camera keeps drifting on me. But you can see we've got a whole box of filament here. Pretty much all of it is MatterHackers build series filament. So they've got, of course, a lots of different materials you can choose from. This is a PLA, and it's this kind of orangey, I'll say, I don't know, tangerine or creamsicle type color. And you can see that I printed out the ModBot organizer. That's an absolute travesty. Somehow in the last stream I managed to not do that, but this stream we did. So it looks like I lost my M/10 nuts. Oh, excuse me. M/10 screws in here, and we're gonna have to dig those out of the box later. But yeah, that filament is this filament, or excuse me. This filament is that filament. It's kind of a tangerine-y orange. Oh, there are my M/10. That's quite a way to start out the stream. Then we've got some of their quantum PLA, I think. This is a silky PLA, and the boxes were actually done in this silk PLA color. So I probably printed these quite a bit too fast in terms of trying to get the most out of the silkiness. I've heard you need to print silky filament's pretty slow and at a certain temperature, but it's got a really nice cool sheen to it, which I like. I don't know where the music's too loud. Turn that down a little bit. Then we've got just some general build series ABS. So this is their white. Let's see, this is a blue ABS. Got the red ABS and the yellow PLA. And then we've got two of their quantum filaments, which have some really cool color properties to them. Find a way to get this guy open. So this is the dichromatic PLA in quantum blue raspberry. So you can see if I hold it this way, you can see all of the blue. If I hold it this way, you can see all of the raspberry. So some pretty cool effects there. I'm interested to see what type of prints might work. I see a lot of people do vase mode type stuff with these kind of mono or dual chromatic filaments. And then we've got this guy, which is a green and raspberry. So looking at it from this side, it's got the green, then you flip it over, it's got the raspberry. Pretty cool effects. Interested, if you guys have any print recommendations, let me know for some of that. So they have a lot of filaments to choose from. I have been purchasing a fair bit of the filaments I've been using, including this stuff. They also have refills in their build series ABS now. So this is just a black refill, but I really like these because when I was printing stuff throughout the pandemic, PPE and things like that for frontline workers, I was just getting so many spools and spools and spools of empty spools that I needed something to do with. So I started picking up some of the ones from Inland. They offer some spoolless ones that works with like the master spool, if you guys are familiar with that. But I'm glad that other companies, I think Prusa is starting to offer refills, and then MatterHackers and a lot of other companies. So hopefully, this will help reduce some of the ecological footprint that 3D printing as a hobby has, if we can not have to dispose of those kind of spools. As far as I know, there's not much in terms of recycling those. I think there's a few companies that will accept them in some regard or another so that they can reuse them. When I was at Earth, there was a filament company there that did that, but yeah, so go check out MatterHackers if you guys are interested in either this kit or any of their filaments or their other products. I buy my hot ends from them. I buy a lot of Bondtech stuff from them, so links in the description to go check them out. Next up on the itinerary, last stream we just unboxed the kit and got everything kind of set up and organized. I have it over on my table over there, and we went through all the different components, talked about some of the differences between the LDO kits and some of the other kits out there on the market, and specifically some of the differences I noticed with the LDO kit versus the FormBot kit. So yeah, that was the stream. Since then, I've gone ahead and done a few things. One thing was organizing all the stuff, as I mentioned. I think I tweeted out some pictures of kind of everything laid out. I did go ahead and take all the hardware and take them out of the individual bags, and I've put them into the ModBot kit, or the ModBot hardware organizer specifically for the V0. So he's got the Voron symbol on the side there, and you can see he's just got drawers for pretty much all your different common things. I did go ahead and use a label maker the last time I built this. Which camera do I want to use? So I've got the shims, slide-in nuts, M3 nuts, miscellaneous inserts, and then all the M2 through M3 different sizes that we need to build a kit. I prefer this over having them in individual bags that you have to go looking for the bag, find the bag, take out the number of screws you need, seal up the bag, put it away, and then you just have to go and get it, or you can just kind of end up in a bag ammonium. So as long as you don't accidentally tip it forward when you're carrying it and have a couple of the drawers come out like I just did, you should be okay, but highly recommend that. I will try to get a link to it in the description or comments below, but thanks to Daniel from ModBot for putting that together. What else did I do? I isolated some of the old stuff. I did want to show that. So the way that the LDO kits work is that they kind of, at least between the V0.1 and V0.2 versions of the kits, they've kind of enhanced them. So they took their original V0.1 kit and then they have a V0.2 upgrade. And when you buy a V0.2 kit from them, it's the old kit plus the new kit, if that makes sense. So these are some of the parts that are unnecessary. They are for the V0.1. So we've got all of the top hat pieces. The old top hat for the V0.2 was very, very different. So this guy looks quite a bit different as well. Oh, and I just realized I have top chat on. Let me turn that off and change it to live chat, just in case anybody pops in here. And then also the bottom deck for the printer is different. The main difference is that the cable chain used to be over here, and now this notch is on the inside. So they have a new panel that replaces this guy. Then there is a old 3006 fan that came with the V0.1 version of the kit. You don't need this anymore, so you can kind of toss it in your box of fans if you're anything like me. And then the V0.2 is also switched to sensorless homing. So the X end stop and the Y end stop, I'm not sure, no, this is X end stop and Y end stop are no longer needed. So I just wanted to call those out as, you know, things to be aware of that you can probably just box up and put in a box and not have to worry about accidentally using or making reference to. So yeah, just a few things that you might want to take note of. Next up, we identified and labeled all of the extrusions. So that is something that I wish kit manufacturers would be a little bit better about. In the Voron kits, particularly the V0, it's really important to kind of note the differences between the extrusions. In the LDO kits and a lot of the other kits on the market right now, they actually tap every single hole on the ends of all of the extrusions, and that's one way that in the V0 manual they have you identify the extrusions. So honestly it took me only about 15 minutes to do this time because I had already done it and I had pictures from the last time I did so. But yeah, for others it might be a little bit more difficult or time consuming to make sure that you get all this stuff set up correctly. But you just want to make sure that you mark and identify all your extrusions and have them together so that you can get them when the manual references them. And also you want to make sure that you don't use the wrong extrusion in the wrong spot. So I've got this one labeled as E, this one labeled as D, then over there I have A and B, and I think the other one is like H or something like that. But yeah, I've got all of our extrusions labeled, did that off stream. A and B and C and H are the other types. And then what else did we do? No drop nuts. I started to go ahead and print out some of the no drop nuts. So these allow you to slide the nuts into the extrusion and not have them slide around. So you have to preload a lot of nuts for the V0 kit, and they kind of just sit in the printer unused until you get to the part where they are, you know, needed, and then you screw something into them. And if you don't have anything to hold them in place, like, you know, what do they call it? The slide-in nuts with the little ball ends on a larger extrusion, these will just slide around. And occasionally there's nothing on the ends that will prevent them from completely sliding out of the printer. So that's just something to be aware of. These no drop nut mods allow you to kind of plop them into the extrusion and they kind of hold them in place. So I got a fair few of those printed out, and not all like 120 that you need, but I'll just kind of continually do it as we move along. So for this stream, I wanted to go ahead and do some sort of preps and checks for some stuff. So one thing I wanted to talk about is how I kind of bench test some of my electronics. This comes from experience building PCs, where it's probably the worst feeling I can think of, where you start to build a PC, you get it almost completely built or completely built, and you go to power it on and it doesn't turn on, and you have to then diagnose what's wrong with it. It might be the RAM, it might be the CPU, it might be the motherboard, but, notification. So whatever the case might be, you have to, like, inside of the case, try to diagnose what's going on. It might be a loose cable. So what I typically do with PCs is I build most of the printer outside of the case, making sure that everything turns on. I get my first post, and then I put everything inside of the printer. So, or excuse me, the computer. So you can kind of do the same thing with your printer. I know people who get all the way through their build process and find out that 2 of their fans don't work, or just that their board is, you know, DOA, and it's kind of the last part of the build. So to me, it's kind of analogous of building a whole PC and, you know, finding out in the last hour that something is missing. So then you have to RMA, you know, submit a support ticket to try to get a replacement, or go buy it yourself and pay for fast shipping. And it's almost worse for a 3D printer that you're building like the Voron, because it maybe takes weeks for you to get to that point where you're actually, you know, almost ready to start printing, and then you find out that something's missing. So I've got my bench top, where is the? I've got my bench top power supply set up here, and then I've got a few different cables which allow me to hook up specific components to it. So I've got 2 different JST XH cables for testing fans. So let's see if I also reset up my cameras. So let's see what you guys see. That's not helpful. Let's see. So I've got 2 different ends on this, and you might not be able to see, but one has a black marker on this side and one has a black marker on this side. And this is just to handle the polarity of different fans. Sometimes you get fans and they're pinned one way, and sometimes you get them and they're pinned the other way. So I have a cable for each of those. So we're gonna test our fans and then test out our board and our Pi. And then we're gonna see if we can maybe try to get into our Pi without having the Wi-Fi set up. So let's go ahead and start testing the fans. I think this might be the right wire, but basically you want to look at the polarity of your fan, look at your wire, and then note that it's like black to black. So let's switch to, nope, that's not a thing. Let's see, I need to change. This cam? Ugh, the white balance on this one is terrible. But hopefully it allows you to see. We've got the wire plugged into our PSU. It's not turned on yet. And then we want to make sure that the polarity matches with our actual fan. So this one has, if I make things up correctly, this one has the negative on the left and the positive on the right. Gosh, that white balance is so awful. Can I change that? Kind of makes me want to throw up a little bit. This is actually a fairly expensive camera for it to not be able to get white balance all that well. So let's turn this guy on. Hopefully you can see that we've got it set for just about 24 volts. Make sure our polarity is correct. Plug in the fan. Whoop. And it is spinning, so that's a good fan. You can also do a little bit of a noise test to get an idea of how noisy your fans are going to be and see if there's something that you're going to want to replace. Our extruder cooler fan is working. Let's see, this is, I think, the MCU fan, which is the same model as the cooler fan, the extruder fan, but it has a different lead on it. So they're actually, 3 of the 4 cables are actually, how do you say, labeled. and one isn't, and that one that isn't is your MCU fan. And let's test out our last MCU fan. So all 4 of our fans are working. That's pretty much to be expected, especially with LDO. I would expect that most of their components are going to be good and well QA'd. Another set of wires I have here are terminated in a set of ferrules, so we can actually swap that in. Turn off the power supply. And we can test out our SKR Pico. Just plug these little banana guys in, pull out our SKR Pico. Oh, drop half the cables. Go back to our overhead. Get the SKR Pico out of the box. It comes with some jumpers and mounting hardware that you don't need for a little while. But this guy accepts 24 volts power down in this corner, and we can basically use this and just make sure it works without having to hook it up to our actual PSU. You could do this with your actual PSU if you wanted to, but I find having a desktop bench power supply is really, really helpful. So let's make sure we get this polarity correct. That is positive and that is negative. And I'm going to tighten those both down. Got the power off again, by the way. So double check just that you've got a good connection. Those aren't quite as tight as they need to be. Do our pull test. Oh, and our ferrule actually came out. So that was a bad ferrule crimp, which is pretty rare. I made these cables, so it's nobody's fault but mine. Let me grab another one. And our ferrule crimper. When I do have ferrules that kind of slip off a little bit, one thing I like to try to do is try to make the wires, the leads, a little fatter by turning them a little bit tighter so that their overall diameter is bigger. And then hopefully that'll give it more purchase. Take our ferrule crimper and crimp it, and it slides off again. So maybe we need to do a more extreme version of that and actually fold them over just a tiny bit. It's getting all sorts of out of sorts. So whatever gauge of this wire is on here, it doesn't seem to like. Where did I put the ferrules that fast? Oh, put them back in the drawer. It's funny when you put stuff back where it belongs sometimes and you end up losing it because of that. Well, we got a stream health. Bit rate is higher than the recommended bit rate. Set it to 13,500. I don't know if that is something I need to immediately take action on or not. The YouTube kind of stream dashboard is giving me a notification that my bitrate is too high. But I set it for, I thought, the recommended bitrate for 1440p. I guess that's what I get for trying to improve my quality of my stream. So now it's a little bit too fat and it won't go onto the ferrule, or the ferrule won't go onto the wire. Kind of an interesting problem. It's either too thin or too big. It's all right. Put it down as tight as I can. Hopefully it stays on this time. Angle the wire. Tighten this guy back down. Oops. Full test. Seem to be in there well. And yeah, so now we should be able to power this guy up and at the very least see that it gets blinking lights. We don't make any magic smoke, but we know our Pico board is working and we don't have to worry about it. So you could carry this as far as you want. So you could also go ahead and grab your Pi and then use the connectors to go from your Pico over to power your Pi. You could completely flash your board this way. You could get your image set up on your Pi, and then, you know, a lot of people don't like to actually hook their Pi up to their router to SSH into it for the first time. But if you do it kind of in this fashion, the point I want to get across is that you don't have to worry about it being inside of the printer and then that making everything really, really hard to kind of like carry forward and do any troubleshooting with. So if you ran into a problem with your fans, some of them not working, then you could put in an order for new fans as soon as possible. And by the time you get to your tool head build, hopefully that will be all right. If your board wasn't working or your Pi wasn't working, anything of the sorts, then you could kind of just handle that as soon as possible and not get to that part of the build and then realize that you're kind of SOL and you're gonna have to pause your build for, possibly multiple weeks in order to get those parts replaced. So that's just a little thing I like to do. I figured I'd let people know about it. You guys can do however level of kind of bench testing that you want to. You could go through and put together pretty much all of your electronics. You could test out your hot end a little bit, or at least your thermistors and all that kind of stuff. You could pretty much completely set up Clipper up to kind of like getting the printer config loaded without hooking everything up to your actual printer. So that's just something I like to kind of have in mind and wanted to share with you guys. But other than that, I think we're ready to start working on the actual printer. So let me get this PSU out of the way. If you guys do kind of enjoy that tip, let me know. If any of you guys do bench testing on your printers, I'd also be interested to hear what kind of different stuff you might do. So we still actually need to do a little bit of prep. We need to prep the rails. So let's grab our linear rail kit. I also have this little guy that I used to store hardware in, but now I'm just storing some lubricant. So we've got our EPT lubricant. I think I bought this from either Fabrico or DFH. You can get it from most of the kind of 3D printer Voron DIY oriented shops. Fabrico, West 3D, KB 3D, all those guys are really nice. I got to meet a lot of them at ERF this year. But I think I'm gonna go ahead and use the EPT. The white lithium kind of super lube will work fine from what I've read. It's got a different kind of viscosity and different properties to it. I won't get into the whole argument about what type of grease is the best, because it's kind of, I don't know, it's almost philosophical at this point. I've seen a lot of people talking about that online, and I'm not sure I have enough expertise to add to the conversation. So we first want to clean off the rails. So I'm gonna blow this out and we're actually gonna use this. You just need something that's big enough to contain the rails that won't take up a ton of extra volume. So we can fill this up with our ISO. Just high enough that it can submerge the rails. Let's start with this Hiwin rail. So there's 5 rails total in the kit. One of them is meant to be used with the X-axis, and that is the rail that has a little green and red carriage instead of the black ones, and it's labeled as Hiwin instead of LDO. You do want to be careful with this one because it doesn't have the rubber stoppers that will prevent the carriage from completely coming off. Some people actually like to take the carriage off in order to do their lubing and cleaning, but it's not necessary. So there is a tiny bit of grease on this rail, or it's kind of like a shipping grease. It's very low viscosity, so we want to make sure we get that off. Usually that's to help protect the rails during shipping. They don't know how long this is going to sit in a container ship or on a shelf at a store, so they usually kind of coat them in something anti-corrosive to make sure that they don't rust too much. So I'm just going to submerge it in the isopropyl, and we're going to run the carriage back and forth a little bit, making sure that we don't let it slip off. And the goal is just to get any of that shipping grease off. So I can already feel it becoming a little bit less, I would say, crunchy as some of that shipping grease comes off and gets diluted by the alcohol. I also like to kind of flip it over and do the reverse. Like I said, you can completely take the rail off of, or the carriage off of the rail in order to do some cleaning if you want. And you can spray some alcohol in there. I've seen quite a few people who like to do that. Whether or not it's necessary, I'm not sure. LDO do have a cleaning and greasing guide that would probably be good to show at this point. Gotta find the browser that is meant to share. Where is that guy at? Your rail greasing guide. Let's go to desktop. So here it is. This is on the LDO documentation. If you go to the V0.2 guide, then you can access this. So they go over pretty much the processing we're going to be doing. You want some alcohol. They use the bags that it came in, I guess, in order to do the cleaning, which is an interesting option. And then they recommend doing it from the back. So you take your syringe, with one hole, you press in enough grease from the back and it goes into the back of the carriage, fills up all the kind of areas of that. You run it back and forth to make sure all the balls are covered, and then you clean stuff up. So they call it packing. Yeah, then you want to clean it up. So we're going to follow along basically what they've said to do here. All right, so after I am happy, I know some people that say to maybe soak these overnight. I can't quite remember what the LDO direction said to do. I usually don't get that intense with it. If your rails come particularly kind of, I'll say, crunchy and or just don't feel great, maybe that will be a good option. But these from LDO, I don't particularly feel that much deep cleaning is necessary. I do want to go into the channel and kind of pull out any contaminants that might be lodged in there. I'm not seeing much. Again, trying to be very careful to make sure I don't accidentally have the rail come off. So that does feel quite a bit smoother. There was a little bit of, I don't know how else to describe it besides crunchiness at one of the ends of the rails before I cleaned it, and that seems to have gone away. So we're just gonna set that on a paper towel and let it dry out. If you have lint-free paper towels, they might be a good shout to use instead. But we're gonna let that dry so we don't have a lot of alcohol on there. The higher percentage your isopropyl alcohol, the faster it will actually dry. So that's a little top tip. So now we have the LDO rails, and these are meant to be used as your Y and your Z. So you'll use 2 for the Y and 2 for the Z. Some people like to really kind of check these and see which ones feel the best, and whichever ones feel the best, they'll use that as the Y. That's the more important kind of kinematics portion of the printer. Then the Z is just moving up and down very, very slowly as you're printing and homing. So you don't need it to be the smoothest rail. So if any of the rails are noticeably smoother, you probably want to use them as your Y gantry rails. Same process. I'm going to temporarily remove the rubber stoppers so that I can move the carriage all the way along. Get the balls to make sure that they've traveled the full extent. And just try to get any gunk and such out of the rail. You can definitely feel the difference in the preload of these rails versus the Hiwin ones. I talked a little bit last stream, I almost let that slip off, a little bit last stream about what a preload is and what it means. There's kind of a lot to it. Preloads, it's kind of a whole science of mechanical engineering and systems engineering and stuff that I'm not, sufficiently well versed in. I did do an internship at a components group called Mode Components Group, where I was a process engineering assistant, and I got a little bit of exposure to different types of machinery. And I was basically doing floor plans where I was kind of moving machines around, but I did get to talk to some guys about kind of some of the jigs and fixtures and stuff that they set up, and a preload was on motion systems, so it's a very, very important thing. While it does kind of help reduce deflection, and that's the main reason we want it on the X-axis, is so that your tool head doesn't deflect too much. It can introduce, especially on systems where you have 2 rails in parallel, your parallelism requirements go up as your preload goes up, typically. So when your preload is higher, the balls in the carriage are actually bigger than the channel. And if they're smaller than the channel, that's called a clearance. But when they're bigger than the channel, you can imagine that they kind of have to be very well aligned. So if they're not parallel at all and you have a higher preload, you could get a lot more racking and just like not good motion. So while some people do think about buying higher preload rails for all of their axes when they self-source, it might not be all that necessary, and it might not be all that helpful. I'm sure people with more mechanical engineering and engineering backgrounds might have a little bit more to say than that. Whether on the systems that we're talking about, which are generally kind of just like very precise hot glue guns, whether or not it matters all that much, I'm not sure, but yeah. Jabbing on and on and on about stuff I don't know all that much about. 2 rails down, clean the 3rd. If you do start to notice that the alcohol is getting particularly discolored, like you're getting a lot of kind of nastier grease and contaminants out, that's a good thing, but you can go ahead and change that if you need to. So this rail doesn't feel nearly as good as the second one I did. So I might look to make this one a Z rail. I don't know if you can see kind of it. There's just a little bit of stiction with it right now. That might come out as I clean it better. And then eventually as we lube it. But I do like how the LDO rails don't have a lot of nastiness on them. That said, the FormBot didn't come in a lot of shipping grease either, but I have seen other rails either in kits or bought by self-sourcers where the rails are covered in a really, really thick grease. Again, to help protect them, but then you end up having to spend your time and effort getting them cleaned up. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. You get hopefully a better running rail that's not rusted, but you have to do more cleanup. So I can just hear that a little bit more than the other rail that was the same brand. Yeah, lint-free paper towels would probably be a better bet. I think I'm gonna do one final rinse on these and then clean them off or dry them off with a lint-free paper towel before we actually do the greasing. Get our stops placed back in those. Let's see how this rail feels in comparison. Fairly smooth. Rubber stopper actually already came out on its own. Yeah, this one definitely seems like it's a good candidate for the Y. So far, pretty happy with the quality of the LDO rails. I can't recall who it was in chat last stream who mentioned that their old V0.1 kit from LDO came with all LDO rails, including the X-axis, and apparently maybe it had too much deflection or just had some type of issues and they ended up replacing it, and then now obviously they're putting the Hiwin rails, which are maybe just more expensive and a higher spec, on the X. So those two rails right here so far are best candidates for the Y. We'll fill out this last rail as we clean it, and then we'll also go ahead and rinse them off one more time, place them to dry on a lint-free paper towel from the garage, which I need to go get. And then we'll be ready to lube. Okay, maybe I'll show a couple different ways to do the lubing, because I ended up re-lubing my rails when I built the FormBot kit. So this one doesn't feel bad. Maybe not as good as the other two. I'll kind of do them side by side after they're clean. Maybe again after they're greased. This was something I was very, very worried about the first time I built the V0. Bit more comfortable now. Still don't have like nearly as many printers under my belt as other folks. Swipe away some of these notifications. There's just a tiny bit of like dark stuff that comes off when I really kind of put my fingernail into the groove, but no big chunks of metal from where they were cut. No big honking grease boogers or anything like that. Seem like pretty nice quality rails. So I think these two felt the nicest in terms of their motion. This one definitely feels a little stickier than the other, so this is definitely going to be a Z. These three, these actually skate kind of way better than the ones that came in the FormBot kit, I have to say. By skating, I mean they just kind of slide of their own weight. A lot of the times preloaded rails don't skate all that well because they're preloaded and they kind of require a preloaded weight to be on them. So yeah, you can see this one doesn't just kind of slide super far on its own accord. If it had some weight on there, it would probably do it. Like as I press down on it, it slides a whole lot easier. And that's just kind of another thing about preload on rails and motion systems. It's like they're kind of designed to have that load on them when they're working the best. And if your application doesn't necessarily put that load on them, then maybe it's detrimental. Not sure. A higher preload also means typically the lifetime and degradation of the rails can be higher because you have oversized balls in the grooves, and that's just going to increase friction. And friction with fast motion equals heat. So I don't know, maybe I'm just standing on a soapbox with this whole preload thing, but I think people kind of look at preload as this place where they can spend extra money that might not be necessary. It doesn't just solve all issues having a higher preload everywhere. But again, if anybody knows a little bit better, let me know. So I'm gonna do one more squirt on all these rails just to get rid of any of the lint. And let me go get a lint-free paper towel. Hey, Jeff. Thanks for hopping in. We're doing some prep. I was just talking with my mic muted for like 5 minutes. Sorry about that. I was explaining what we've gone through and done in the stream so far. We built a bunch of our hardware in the very beginning. But yeah, there was some trouble with the stream where YouTube was telling me that the bit rate was too high and it wasn't letting the stream like go live or something like that. I've been trying to up the quality for the stream to 1440p and up the bit rate, and it seems to not be something that YouTube likes, but hopefully the quality of the stream is doing good. Hopefully the audio is okay. If you are here, let me know if the music is audible and or too loud. I also went over doing a little bit of bench testing of electronics in order to just make sure they work before you get the entire printer built, and then, you know, come to find out that one of your fans doesn't work. That's a kind of terrible feeling, and then you have to contact LDO to send you another one out, and I'm sure they'll, you know, take care of you, but it's still going to slow you down for a little bit. Or your SKR Pico. So I took out my benchtop power supply. We tested all the fans, made sure that they got hooked up. I showed a little connector I made for that, and then we started talking about some of the build process. Cheatham 007, what up? Just found you recently, digging the live streams, man. Thank you. I've been trying to improve them. Been trying to improve the quality. The audio in the first set of streams was really not the best quality, so that's something we've tried to improve. We've got like the DJI wireless mic that a lot of people use. I've been switching around the camera views, trying to figure out, this camera keeps floating away for some reason. I've got it on a swing arm, but it won't stay static. But trying to find the best camera for the best angle. So this camera right here used to be above, but now I got it on a little arm where I can move it around and hopefully get in some better angles. So we are cleaning off our rails and getting ready to grease them. Sounds good, sweet. I was talking about how to identify, you know, what's going to be the best quality rails. I already gave these a rinse in a bath, trying to get any of the shipping grease off, and now I'm just giving them kind of one more rinse to hopefully get any lint or anything that I might have contributed to it off. And we're doing a final little drying on our lint-free paper towel, shop towel. I was super nervous about the linear rails when I built my first FormBot, or the first V0 kit from FormBot. I hadn't really built a motion system with linear rails before. I've used a couple, but not that it's like old, what do they say, old hat or anything like that. Now I just feel a lot more comfortable with it. I'm not worried I'm just gonna mess everything up. I don't know if anybody else felt that way when they were building their first Voron or first high-end DIY printer, but this rail definitely feels like it's got a bit more kind of stiction to it. So I'm thinking it'll be a good candidate for the Z. Because ideally the Y will be the best two performing of the four, and then the Z is, or excuse me, the X will be the preloaded one. I talked a little bit about preloading on linear motion systems. I'm not sure if anybody caught that part, but it's something that, you know, we talk about a bit in 3D printing, but I don't know if anybody's gone into a whole lot of detail about it. Maybe like Eddie the engineer, talk about preload on linear rails. Hello, new master. Thanks for hopping in the stream. We're gonna try to get as far as we can today in a couple hours. before I, get famished and find myself needing to eat before I pass out. I'm wearing my MatterHackers shirt today. Just want to remind everybody that they provided the kit for me to make some content around, but didn't have any stipulations about what they wanted me to specifically show. They said I could do live streams or review or just use it in projects. So that's pretty cool of them, kind of. Really, they just want to let people know they have the LDO kits and that they are a good option if you want to pick one up. So I have a link in the description if you guys are looking to pick up either a V0.2 kit, a Trident, or a V0 or V2.4. They have all three of the kits, and I think the newest revisions. They are authorized LDO dealer, of course. They have a few different options for upgrades, like you can get some obsidian nozzles for the Voron Revo that comes in the kit. You can get printed parts from them and ABS, of course. So yes, I'm gonna let these dry for a little bit, and I'm gonna go pour out this used isopropyl in my little, I've got a little dish I use for washing, or not a dish, a container I use for washing resin prints. And I just let the alcohol evaporate outside and then let all the resin cure. So we'll use that to do this as well. Be back, and I remembered to not mute myself this time, or I remembered to unmute myself this time. What did New Master say? Just finished watching your FormBot V0.2 build streams. They were great, and they helped a lot setting up my printer, especially the clipper side. Awesome. That's kind of 80% of the purpose of these streams, is to, especially for the FormBot kit, which is known to not have much, if any, documentation whatsoever. They're there. They're a little bit of a, I don't want to say the guide specifically. I just kind of wanted to share my experience building the kit, and then I've been finding a lot of people have found it valuable for just kind of getting their kit put together. A lot of the troubles I seem to have run into, other people are running into as well. So having it somewhat documented is hopefully pretty helpful for people. I do also have a GitHub set up with a lot of resources if anybody's building the FormBot kit, because I just noticed that they didn't have a lot in terms of documentation. So I want to, again, identify my 2Z rails. That one feels, it doesn't skate the best. This one skates pretty well. By skating, I mean it kind of moves under its own load. This one does as well. So these three, this one definitely I want to use for the Z. These three, I just want to figure out which two feel the best and use those ideally for the Y. Whoop. Don't let that carriage fly off. This feels the absolute best. I'm not sure if you guys can notice it while I push. These two are still pretty good, but they're just not as nice feeling. And this one, I don't know, I feel like I can feel some of the rotations of the balls, if that makes sense. If I put a little preload on it, it's not too bad. Like if I push down on it, put a little load on it rather. So we know this is going to be the X. I say these two are going to be our Y and these two will be our Z. So if you want to, you can take a post-it note or something and make note of that. But hopefully these are pretty sufficiently dry. Again, I use 91% isopropyl alcohol. One good thing about it is that it dries up quite quickly. I like playing with the linear rails. Easily entertained. I mentioned before that LDO does have a greasing guide that you can check out. Well, that's not the greasing guide. That's Twitter. So after having washed them, we basically just want to load some in the back. Let's see what a good setup will be for this. Do I want to do overhead or do I want to do... Yeah, I guess we'll go back to overhead. And then instead of my face, we will do desktop. So you guys can kind of see what I'm referencing as we do some of the build. So basically they call for just loading the grease in the back through one of the rail holes to kind of pack it in. So we'll go to one of the middle holes. Hiwin rail still has a little bit of isopropyl in it. I gotta make sure I don't lose track of which rail is which. So I've got two different syringes here for our grease. This one is a syringe I bought for doing some other stuff, for actually doing some injection molding of polyurethane, but I repurposed it and I just packed some super lube, your typical lithium grease, multi-purpose stuff. This seems to work fine. I've seen a lot of people on the V0 and other forums say that this works really well. It might not last as long as some of the more higher quality, quote unquote, bushy greases like this. This is the EP2 grease. You can pick this up from DFH and KB3D and Fabrico and West 3D. I like all of those sites. I kind of try to spread the love around in terms of buying stuff from them and, you know, on their Black Friday sales and stuff like that, pick up a few things. But yeah, so we're going to use the EP2 since it's a little bit more recommended by the Voron team. I'm not going to get into kind of the merits of different types of grease and the viscosities and how long they last under which type of conditions and all that kind of stuff, because I'm not an expert on it, but you can argue that in the Voron discords if you want. Some people recommend slightly different kind of brands and types of grease. So they recommend just putting it on the back. Whoop, gotta hold it down and pressing it through. It will start to move into the carriage and eventually, hopefully we'll see it start to protrude out of the sides of the rail. You gotta hold it straight, because it doesn't seem to load up. Again, this is a little bit of one of the parts that made me a fair bit nervous doing this the first time. Well, all that just squirted out the side. So I can feel that the grease is really well in there amongst the balls. It just starts to move differently. You'll notice they don't kind of skate as well now. Guess the grease's job is to reduce friction, but it also has the impact of literally gumming things up a little bit. So in their guide, they kind of show it coming out of the gaps between the rail and the carriage. I'm not quite seeing that, but I can definitely feel that it's in there. I guess you have to hold it super, super straight in order to kind of get that much in there. All right, now I see it coming out of the side of the channel a little bit. And I'm gonna go to the other end of the, well, one end of the rail. Sure, keep up with the chat. Load up just a bit more. This end as well. EPT definitely has a smell that's quite a bit different and noticeable compared to the white lithium type lubricant, but it's not like noxious or anything. You just notice that it's there. I think this is used a lot in a lot of automotive type shops. That's one rail down. Doing the Hiwin rail now. If you're watching, what is your favorite technique for applying lubricant to linear rails? Do you like doing it through the back? Do you like to take the carriages off? Do you like using the ports on the wipers? Not sure there's a quote-unquote correct way to do it. Yeah, I can feel that now. Also find myself peeking over just to look at the stream health every once in a while. We'll just do 3 squirts per rail. Get it nice and distributed. Easy way is through the back, yeah. It involves a little bit more cleanup, I'd say, than if you go through like the wiper ports and can keep everything kind of inside the carriage. I honestly got super lazy with my last build and just used WD-40 spray white lithium grease. If it's working and you're not noticing any degradation or performance differences or sounds or anything like that, I think it's probably a little bit less viscous, the WD-40, so in an enclosed printer, it might evaporate or kind of run out, or not run out, but you know what I mean? It might go away a little bit faster, but if it works, it works. We need to get this rail, and the two center rails are going to be our Y rails. I'm trying to keep track of that and not let myself forget. I think this Mobilux grease was like $9 or $10 from most of the DIY printer stores. It's not too expensive, and one tube is definitely enough for more than, at least for V0s, it's more than enough for a V0. You can probably get like 2 V0s, a Micron, and a couple other printers for ants. There we go. So I'm just trying to distribute the grease as evenly as possible till it's interesting when you add the grease, you can kind of, especially grease this thick, you can kind of feel it slow the rail down again so that it kind of doesn't skate as well on its own. And then as you kind of move it through all the raceway and the balls, you can feel it loosen up a little bit. Three down, 2 to go. There you go. You can see it coming out of the sides a little bit. And then it feels like really, really free over here. And then in the middle, it feels like it needs to be distributed a bit better. Go off to the side. Do a little bit more. On the left side. Notice I'm getting slightly faster at it as I do more and more. I do have an ender wire build in the works. We're getting planned. I've got the ender, which was an open box for like $80. It's an ender V2, I think. It might be a Pro, I can't remember. It's the one that works the best with the Underwire mod. And so I'm gonna have to do rails on that as well. I'd really like to do a Trident build soon. I know Steve would say that he thinks it's one of the best Vorons to start out with. The V0 is a very simple motion system, a kinematic system, but the preloading of the nuts and all that kind of stuff is kind of what makes it finicky. Just the small size in general makes it a little hard to deal with. And the Trident's just a cool printer. All the Vorons are, I guess. See it coming out the side. I squeezed a little bit of excess out. I'm trying to avoid that. I just used super lube. Yeah, I showed this. This one has super lube. I think it loads a little bit easier. It's a little bit less viscous, and it gets into the carriage a bit easier. New master involves a bit of cleanup, but it's well worth it. Bird dog, hello. I haven't had any issues yet, but I'm keeping an eye on it. Oh, in terms of the other grease. B2 and Pro both work, okay. I mean, I actually went looking for an end. I have two enders, but they're a little bit of they're workhorses, so I didn't want to disrupt them. I got them tuned well for PLA. Do a lot of prints for friends and just random stuff on them. So I went and found a little box of scraps. It's an open box from some company on eBay that seems to like get a lot of enders and other Creality and popular printers in as returns, or maybe they buy Amazon crates or something like that and end up with a lot of them. How to get some of this excess grease. Close that up. One thing I like about this little container is that I can just throw these guys back in it after all the isopropyl is hopefully dried up. And that's my little greasing kit. I do eventually maybe want to try a different method. I've done a different method off camera, but you know, Steve likes to actually take the rails off, I think, and do it, or the carriages off the rails. Oh, I didn't want to do it with the linty paper towels. So now I just want to get up any of the super excessy grease. You mainly just want it in the carriages, so it will kind of get caught up in the holes that you press through. So a Q-tip is a really good shout for getting that out. I mean, technically, if it's not one of the screw holes that you need to use, you could leave it in there, but we're gonna end up screwing through most of these. I want to get it cleaned up if possible. Maybe I will go and grab a Q-tip. Not sure of a better way to get the grease out. A pair of gloves might be a good shout if you don't like getting industrial grease all over your hands. I don't think this stuff is harmful as far as I know, but it does get all over the place. I've gotten the counter bores mostly cleaned out, but I can still tell there's a little bit in the actual holes. Maybe I'll try to find, here we go, we have the syringe that comes with the EP2 grease. We'll just stick that guy through. Kind of just using the paper towel to push the grease through the counter bore holes and then wipe it off on the other side. And then use the syringe to kind of get out any of the extra excess. If anybody has a better system for doing this, I'm all ears. That's a Z, this is a Z. And maybe this is something I will start to do off stream. I think after people have seen it once or twice, it's not really something that's like all that hard that I need to show it every time or anything, or interesting for that matter. In fact, it's a tad bit finicky, which I would imagine doesn't make for the best viewing experience. What are you guys working on as either projects or prints or printers? I of course have this printer and the ender wire coming up. I also have the Big Tree Tech Nomi. I have the V1 and the V2, and I want to do kind of a combined video for both of them to go over what I think of them. I generally kind of like them. I know some people don't want a kind of cutesy smiley face thing on their printer. You can, of course, kind of change the animations if you want to something completely different if that's not, you know, your style. But I've seen a lot of people noting that they think it will choke their cooling, which is an interesting thought. You know, this is talking about Vorons, which are ABS printers. So you hear a lot of people say the cooling isn't all that important on a Voron or ABS printer. But sneak preview, I've done some A and B testing and I haven't noticed much of a difference with the Nomi shroud versus the regular shroud. See, Jeff Montgomery is working on a Voron Legacy build. Oh, was a fun build. Hey Truggy, thanks for hopping in. Preferred, I bought I used non-working Ender 3 Pro for your Ender wire. Jeff is starting to build a second Micron and V2 build into tool changer. That sounds like an awesome build. I've been watching Zombie working on his tool changer, and it looks so awesome. You know, whether it's the most efficient kind of use of space in terms of a multi-material setup, maybe not, but it's definitely, I think, the coolest. Like even over a Prusa XL, I think tool changers are just like awesome. It kind of makes me think of, we see them a lot in CNC machines, the automatic tool changers. And it's cool that some of that is coming over to printers. Chuggy is waiting for his rook. Nice. Saw Steve Builds just started working on his in the last couple of weeks. Trying to put input shaper on your V0. Cool. I did a basic pass of input shaping, used it to tension my belts a little bit, and was fairly happy with it. I think my table had a huge impact. So I had it on this table at first, which is a sit-stand desk, and it gets really, really high. And at the highest setting, it got some terrible resonances. And then I put it on a more solid cart, and it also, it got a whole lot better results that way. So that's something to think about. Your table can actually really impact your input shaper results, or your surface that you have it on. You know, to the point where they say if you end up moving your printer, you might want to do your input shaping again. A lot of people put their printers on like metal shelves, and the resonances on that can be a little rough. Got some notifications I want to check out. I think we're going to go to about 6 today, so we'll see how far we can get on that. The Finch, hey, welcome to the stream. Rebuilding a V0.1 to a V0.2-R1 and self-sourced the switch wire. Nice, a whole switch wire, not a interwire conversion, but like straight from the ground up switch wire. That's pretty cool. I know Steve just built a switch wire, and well, he's built several ender wires, but he just did a whole switch wire kit from LDO, the new kit. And then Modbot has been doing a Cyber, I think, ender wire conversion, but with a kit. I'm not sure if there's a lot of ender wire conversion kits out, or if that's somewhat unique. You'll do it on the floor, the input shaper. Well, that's the interesting thing is, like, you want to do it where you're going to have the printer, right? Because it's testing resonances and then giving you a mapping and a suggestion of accelerations and a algorithm to use to fix those resonances. So if you do it on the floor and you don't get any good kind of mapping, and then you move your printer somewhere else, it's going to change, right? So I guess the suggestion would be, if you do your input shaping on the floor, you want to keep your printer on the floor. Might be mistaken with that, but I think that's the way it works. I did want to apologize for everybody for the stream not going live correctly. I've been trying to increase the settings I'm streaming at, and YouTube has just been giving me all sorts of errors and warnings. So I started to go live, and then it like kind of pooped the bed. And before I marked it as like live, I was having to adjust the settings, and then I don't think I fully put it live for a little while. So if you watch back the VOD, there's a longer portion of the stream in the VOD than there is for me actually being live. I also wish I could kind of more readily stream consistently at like certain times, but just with a lot of I coach at a CrossFit gym and just have a lot of projects and side kind of hustle things going on, so it's not easy for me to just set a time and always stick to it, which I know is probably the optimal thing in terms of like growing the stream and channel, but I'm mostly interested in just kind of sharing my experiences with you guys and hopefully providing people with information that's useful for them for their own builds. So like becoming a mega huge streamer isn't really necessarily one of my goals. Would be cool, but I'm just trying to hang out. Yeep. Right, full switch wire. I'm self-sourcing since I want to hire in components. That makes sense. I would keep it on the floor next to your enclosed MK3. Gotcha, makes sense. All right, so we are all lubed up. Let's see, we've got about 17 minutes left. I think we can start to get these mounted at the very least. These are my Z, these are my Y, and that's my X, which is gonna be, I think, a long ways off if I recall correctly. How to get our work surface cleaned up. And let's move over to the V0 manual. That's not it. That is it. Go. So we are going to start. We already know the hardware extrusion prep. You don't really have to worry about that. I did identify the different extrusions and I have them set off to the side. I wish all kit manufacturers would find a way that's cost effective for them to just mark which extrusions are which, and it would save a lot of people, especially beginners, like 15 to 20 minutes and make sure that nobody builds their printer in with the wrong extrusions. But all right, so a nice thing about the V0 kit from LDO is we don't have to worry about preloading these nut carriers because you get these nut bars from LDO. So that's kind of nice. I'll show you those as we start to load them up inside the extrusion. Linear rails preparation and mounting. Most linear rails are alive in shipping oil. So this talks about cleaning and lubing, which we already done. Mine the carriages. I think we're good there. So we need some E extrusions. How many E extrusions are there? There are 4. So we need 2 of the 4. And these will be our Y rails. So I guess that's important to note so that you know which of your nice rails to use. Let me grab the E extrusions. I guess I'll just grab the 2 of them. So the E extrusions are easiest to note because they have blind holes that are kind of offset. So most of the extrusions have blind holes that are like 10 millimeters offset from the end, and these are different. I'm not sure the exact measurement, but that seems to match what we need. And then we can just slide our nut bars. We need the blind holes facing up. We can slide our nut bars into the extrusions. Did it say anything? No. So we obviously only need 2 of the nut bars, but this is a nice little time savings thing, I have to say. Not having to preload all those nuts, not having to worry about the nuts sliding around or anything like that. I can see a little bit of oil on here, or grease, clean up. I believe these 2 on the inside are the ones that we want to use for our Y-axis, and we need to figure out what the differences are from the LDO kit. So they do have a guide in their documentation. It's the wiring guide. They have build notes. So they have a bunch of stuff called out, and you know, on specific pages, things that are in the manual that you don't have to worry about. That's some of the most extensive kind of documentation I've seen of any kit manufacturer actually going through the process of saying, hey, our kit is different, our BOM is different, don't do this on this step, use this. So that's pretty cool. So they note, don't use ball end drivers for M2 screws. That's one thing I noticed where I started the FormBot kit, was I was using some ball end drivers to kind of tighten and untighten the extrusions for the frame and the rails, and that's caused some stripped heads, so that's good to note. Even on their hardware, which is considered high-end, don't use ball head. And then notes M2 ball head, or excuse me, button head screws in place of M2 socket head screws where needed. So I guess that's for mounting the rails. So on page 12, are we on page 12 in the manual yet? Page 12 was... Okay, we could skip that, yeah. So this is a little finicky, I'll say. Skipping back and forth. Extrusions F and G are not included because the Kirigami bed. Oh, there's my AC kicking on. Let's turn it off. Or excuse me, heat. I think the NVIDIA stuff is good enough that it will block it out, but rather just not have it pumping. Skip the loading nuts on page 18. They need to be clean and lube, already did that. Insert the nut bars, rough side up. What side is the rough side? I guess that's the rough side. They're kind of D-shaped, and the D, I think, is the shiny side, so you want that on the bottom. That's what I did. And then page 23 is the next one. So we want to use button head instead of the socket, and we need M6. M2 by 6 button head. M2 by 6 button head. So that might be in separate bag. Yeah. So I guess for all of their rails, they recommend using a M2 by 6 button head instead of the called out socket head. We want to get our rails on there and lined up. And I'm just going to get some screws started to start out with, and then we'll kind of align them better later. So this is one thing I don't like about bags of hardware, is trying to get them out and sorted and making sure you don't accidentally put stuff in the wrong spot. Find the right size bit. I'm actually having a hard time with. Is this supposed to be 1.3? No, that's too small. 1.5 gonna feel too big. No, 1.5 is correct. These seem to only be drilled in the spots where you actually need it to put them. So we're gonna do that. We're not gonna tighten them up. All the way yet. Just trying to get them to hold the extrusion in place, or hold the rail in place basically. But we're building, we're doing it. I can already see where I didn't quite get all the grease cleaned up. Hopefully that won't negatively impact things too much. I think in subsequent steps, we'll have to kind of actually get these aligned where they need to be. And that's when I'll go get the alignment tools, the printed alignment tools. And that is every hole filled. I think one thing I messed up on when I built the Formbot kit the first time is I kind of did the spacing for the Z rails on the Y and then had to undo it because I was rushing. So I want to try not to make any mistakes like that this time. So I was like doing the Y rails, but I was looking at the Z rail instructions. Don't be like Brian. Take your time and read the instructions slowly. I think it was partially because I was streaming and trying to talk to people and stay interesting. It's hard when you're not an interesting person, you know? Okay, these are loose enough. I can kind of move them around. And now I'm going to go grab the alignment tools. I've actually got some special ones. So these are your standard printed alignment tools. They get put on the rail and they make sure that they're fairly centered. And then you need to space them out at the correct distance. But these are alignment tools made by Vector 3D, and maybe you can see they have measurements on them. So 38, 37, and 33, and these you can use. They are the exact spacing that you need for certain distances in the build. So I measured these to make sure that they were fairly accurate. They were accurate to within like 0.4 probably, you know, one nozzle width of, or maybe two nozzle widths. But yeah, they kind of make it easier than I think having to use a pair of calipers. So we need them to be 38. So this is our 38 spacer. Hey Renovic, how's it going? You can put that guy on the end, scoot the rails up, make sure it's exactly at 38 millimeters, and we'll maybe measure. And then as Steve always suggests, we're gonna tighten from the inside outwards. Kind of switching back and forth. Didn't get the notification you started streaming until like 10 minutes ago. Don't worry, it's not you. It's something to do with the way I set up the YouTube stream today. Just wasn't working all that well. I've been trying to like increase the quality, and YouTube has been fighting me and didn't put the stream live the way I intended to. So we are at 38.9, 30, yeah, depends on how much I tilt the calipers, but so accurate to 0.2. Millimeters, not bad. And then we want to do the same thing with this rail. I'm gonna go ahead and put the stoppers back on and make sure the rail doesn't come off. But if you do want to go back and watch Brennevik, I did go over some stuff like how I do a little bit of bench testing of my electronics before starting the build. Go into it, like just barely touches it at the beginning of the stream, but apparently it wasn't fully live at that point. Trying to get these tightened down. I do like these style of RC drivers more so than any kind of typical bit. You can also get, that's stripped out. That's just spinning. This nut bar hole is stripped without me putting much pressure at all. And this one too. And I also didn't put the alignment tools on there. But I'm kind of thinking I'm going to end up taking these out and redoing them because these screws just won't tighten. So that's a little bit of a concern with these nut bars. It seems like some of them, maybe the tapped holes are a little bit better than others. Because I hope you guys can see I wasn't really like crazily torquing these down. I guess the alternative would be to just use regular M3 nuts or the nut carriers. But this one and this one just spin freely, which is less than ideal. How do I want to deal with that? Maybe we want these to be on there and straight. Have M2 nuts somewhere? I'm not sure we do in this kit. What do you guys think? I'm hesitant to use these nut bars if they're gonna be stripped out. Super easy. It's interesting, the first one I didn't have any problems, but the second one, 2 holes. I think it's all or nothing. I don't think I can use this if they are gonna be at all stripped out. I guess that'll be a piece of feedback I give and something I need to note in the review. These are very convenient, but if they're gonna cause me to have to go back and undo stuff, that's not convenient at all. So kind of not worth it in that regard. And then I don't think the kit includes any M2 nuts. Got M3 nuts, of course. But that would be a problem for somebody who doesn't have any extra hardware. Looking through my kind of extraneous bags with just some random hardware in it, and I don't see any M2 nuts. So that's not great. I do have an extra hardware kit somewhere around here that I bought when I bought my FormBot kit, but I don't know if this has M2 nuts either. So this is an LDO hardware kit from like a long time ago. I think I'm just gonna have to spill it out and try to find where, if any, M2 nuts are. So this does have M2 nuts. Presumably they replaced these M2 nuts in the old hardware kit with the nut bars. But can you imagine if you ran into this problem and you didn't have extra hardware? That would be frustrating. I mean, it's frustrating, and I do have a solution for it. What I'm gonna try to do is get these tiny little nuts threaded on here while I don't have the nut carriers printed. I probably would have if I didn't know the nut bars were a thing. So that's a bit of a frustration. I like the convenience factor of the nut bars, but the fact that I was able to strip it without like any effort whatsoever. I mean, this wasn't as if I was trying to strip it, you know what I mean? I very easily stripped it incidentally, and now my fingers have a little bit of grease on them, so getting these threaded is not the easiest. And the screws are falling out. This is frustrating. A frustration I didn't have to deal with the FormBot kit. Now do I just do this with everything? Or do I try the nut bars and if they work, use them, but then I have to do this whole process if they don't work? Or do I print out the nut carriers for the rest of the rails? He knows not. I think I'm gonna check the V0 Discord channel and see if anybody else has had problems with the nut bars. I feel like maybe I recall hearing somebody mentioning that they can be a little strippy, but it wasn't something I was prepared to deal with. Well, turns out I am prepared because I have these, but it wasn't something I was planning on having to deal with. So I've got all those on there. And luckily that works. So we need our 38mm spacer, our alignment tools. So the nut bars actually made it so that the alignment tools weren't even all that necessary. They kind of kept them automatically pretty aligned in the channel. But without the nut bars, you do have to pay a whole lot more attention. What in the heck? Why are you free spinning? Did I not put a nut on you? These are too small and you have to have a nut carrier. Try another nut bar, it might just be one, and talk to whoever you got the kit from. Send a couple of replacements. Yeah, that's what I think a normal person would have to do. Well, I don't want to say a normal person. Somebody who bought their own kit and, you know, spent their own hard-earned money on it would have to do that, right? That would be pretty frustrating. But yeah, these won't lock into the channels without a nut carrier. I just realized that, so that was kind of silly of me. These will just free spin because they're way too small. All right, so one of the nut bars was good. They only give you enough for the kit. That's a little frustrating. I think I'll be able to continue, but you need at least 4 working ones to get through like the first part of the build for the Y rails to get the frame together. You don't need the last one until you're basically about to do not the tool head, but the belts. So that one's a little bit, you know, down the range. Would that be long enough for them to ship one out to you? I'm not sure. So that's definitely something to note, some feedback I'll want to give to them. It's probably something that they've maybe improved since this kit was sent out. This is a revision E kit. I'm not sure what revision they're on, but possibly on the newer kits, you don't have to worry about it as much. We'll find out. I'll do a little bit of inquiry, but I'm actually gonna call it there. I feel like maybe that's a little bit of a sign. I'm gonna end up getting tired and frustrated. But yeah, so today on stream, we got all the prep I wanted to do done in terms of checking the electronics, getting the rails cleaned and lubed, starting to, you know, work on the frame, but then we ran into this problem. And so a little bit, honestly, a little bit like deflating, if that makes sense. You know, if I wasn't on stream, I might be able to kind of like force my way through it a little bit easier, but it is kind of a sucky thing to have to deal with. Ways to get past this would be to print, if you have some M2 nuts, you could print the nut carriers and then slide them in. They're basically a bar like this that hold the nuts. Likely these wouldn't strip out nearly as easy, but I only have these because I bought an extra V0 LDO hardware kit a long time ago when I was building the FormBot kit. So these don't come with the kit. So that is a little bit of a sticking point, that if you're not going to provide the nuts and only the nut bars need to be really high quality. So I'm not sure if they've had to deal with this a whole lot from other people, but that's a little bit of a sticking point and a rough start to the build. Hopefully the rest of the quality, I assume the rest of the quality of the LDO kit is going to be fantastic, but that's a bit of a damper on it. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and call it, kind of try to sort out how I want to attack the rest of the build, figure out some of the streaming setup stuff, because it's been kind of a little bit of a downer as well. And then hopefully the next stream will go a little bit easier, if not hopefully a whole lot easier. But thank you to everybody who tuned in. Thank you for everybody who ends up watching this on the VOD, and I hope it kind of gives you a little bit of information about the stream, keeps you entertained, information about the kit, keeps you slightly entertained. And if you want to know anything else about the kit, my experiences with it, or information about it, if you have questions about it, leave comments down below and I will answer them at my first convenience. Thank you again. I will see you guys in the next stream, hopefully within the next 2 or 3 days, maybe even tomorrow, if I can figure out how to get this working in. But I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.